Okay, Duvid here. Give a little ramble. Got the chess program now. Sundown's very early. Sundown's any minute. I'm probably going to get out of here for Sabbath, but I don't really have a place to pray Friday night. And I enjoyed chess coaching. I think it's a good deed. And so I'm here in Detroit coaching chess as Sabbath is approaching. I had a few thoughts. I thought I'd do a ramble. Last week we had Nakamura and Sunil Wardamantri came to the chess club, and I was one of Sunil's students when I was young. I went to his chess camps. I'd competed in national tournaments and knew Sunil, my brother also, and father. And I saw last week he didn't recognize me. Then he called me later, and I'd caused him problems when I was a kid. And I was speaking to him like, I made bad decisions when I was young. Like, I always liked Sunil. He was one of my favorite chess coaches, and I just made poor decisions when I was young. Like, I was in his chess camps, 12 years old, 8 years old, young kid, and God forbid the shooting in Jersey. And I'm going to talk. I think I got a few conversations lined up this week. E. Michael Jones wants to talk, and Kevin Barrett wants to talk. So I'll probably be doing streams with him. We'll talk more about that. As in, like, we get occasional Israelites here, and I usually have good relations with Israelites, and I would tell people, like, if Judaism as a religion means it's between the person and God. So you had President Trump's executive order doesn't mean Judaism's a race. It's okay, Judaism's a religion. Well, if Judaism's a religion, can't Israelites self-proclaim, like, I'm Jewish, and God forbid the crime, the horrible tragedy happened this week was a Jew-on-Jew violence. And it's a difficulty thing. Like, I'll be discussing that more this week, and we'll see what happens. But it's one of the difficult topics that usually doesn't get discussed. I see it on the floor. Like, I have run-ins with Israelites, sometimes arguments, but generally, pretty friendly. We agree to disagree and have, like, a religious discourse and debates. But usually, like, I'm not going to tell a person who they are and what they are. A person wants to self-identify in a certain way. So it's between them and God. But it's a complicated topic, and probably discuss it more. But you relate to chess decision-making, group identity, kind of like group strategy. We talk a lot, probably the last few weeks on Week in Review, we've been talking a lot about group evolutionary strategy in that way. And but when it comes to chess, there's not really a group strategy. You say, like, people think about chess in a certain way, and there might be inclinations to think in a certain way, but you see all these various kids, their personalities will come out on a chessboard. But if you were playing someone on the internet, I doubt from how they play chess, you would be able to figure out their identity. So to say, okay, this person's African, Jewish, or even though Alexander Alekhine had, during World War II, written those famous essays on the Jewish chess style play, where he claimed that there was a certain style that Jewish players all ended up falling into, and it was flawed in a certain way. But generally, it's pretty hard to say that identity, like, people think there's universal thinking skills. It's not even like language. You say certain people speak language, there might be a connection between race, ethnicity, and language. Although anybody could really speak any language, you might be able to determine a person's race, ethnic identity by how they speak. But from a chessboard, it's unlikely. From a decision-making skills, you'll be like mathematics or something, geometry. It's just a pure processing, thinking skill that applies equally to all people, and everyone has the ability to make good or bad decisions. And something like the chessboard or something like that, just pattern recognition, and it's going to be very difficult to say that different people approach pattern recognition in different ways based on their identity. So it was an interesting thought. Like I've been rambling on this for over a year now. The child development, thinking skills, free will, decision making, soul, consciousness, and various things, and trying to put together thoughts, and also a lot of talk about group strategies. In the sense, say like, okay, in chess you have openings. You have the French and the Dutch, and a lot of the various opening structures are named after ethnic identities, mostly European, from the history of the game. But isn't necessarily like, okay, like a Dutch person's more likely to play the Dutch and a French person's more likely to play the French. But, saying we don't really have too many Dutch players here, but, a lot of people play the French or the Dutch. And, if you looked at the various strategies that the kids employ, here you say basically they employ all the common chess strategies. Anybody can employ any strategy that they want. But when it comes to like long-term group strategies, if that's either through some spiritual explanation of like a guiding angel or evolutionary strategy selection or mating strategy, where people have these limitations on the free will to act in a certain way, programmed based on how their ancestors acted, and there is some truth to that probably. But then you think, is there pure processing skills in terms of anybody is capable of coming at something, examining the evidence, and making a decision? So like, on the chessboard, just like, okay, I'm analyzing the evidence. And, chess is like the human animal. Like everybody basically comes with the same faculties to the chessboard. All people have, the human nature, the human anatomy, the human animal is basically universal across all people. And so the chessboard, when you come to the chessboard, both sides are coming with the same faculties against each other and have the ability to make a decision based on pure thought. Although there's inclinations, you say, okay, I might naturally be inclined to make decisions in a certain way, and some people might be naturally inclined in different ways. And in chess, it'd be hard to say that there's because it's an individual effort that, like there's no, you might say, okay, like I won for my group, I won for my team, but in essence, it's a singular game where it's just you versus the opponent. So you'd be questioning whether there's some sort of group strategy that would imply, or even biases in thinking that someone's identity would make it more likely that they would approach the game of chess in one way or another. So, it's interesting, and we're having a lot of success here with the chess program and your decision-making skills. And like, God forbid, I was watching this video before I came here, P. Diddy and Ray Dalio, and they were talking about investment strategy. I guess P. Diddy's like a student of the investment advice of Ray Dalio. And, P. Diddy was mentioning his tendency to think short term, and Ray Dalio's always trying to have him think in a more long-term way, purely in terms of business strategy. But, that's, if you think, okay, well, cold winter theory, because Ray Dalio ancestors came from cold climates. He's more likely to think in long-term strategy. P. Diddy comes from warmer climates. His ancestors, they're more likely to think in short-term strategy. And that's heavily controversial, the cold winter theory, if there's any accuracy to it. But you see them from the chessboard or something, if you could say, okay, the cold winter theory, that people are more likely to think short-term strategy or long-term strategy. And, so would you be able to test that on a chessboard? Say, okay, that people would be, various people, maybe they tend to think short-term or long-term strategy, maybe more aggressive, more attacking, playing for a mate, as opposed to more positional, looking for a long-term advantage to win in an end game, win a pawn, and queen a pawn. But you see, like, okay, the famous statement, there's more diversity within a group than between groups. So you look here, there's so many different strategies of various kids. You say, okay, not all these kids play aggressively. A lot of these kids are very positional, slow, like to play to the end game. And what would be, from a chess perspective, like cold winter theory, or more long-term planning for winning a tiny bit of material and taking it to the end game, as opposed to like short-term planning where I'm just going to go for the king right away, and such a thing. And maybe if you play kind of like the hustlers, the gamblers, the park players, that you might look at it like your average like street player is more short-term thinking. They go for attacks, aggressive playing, as opposed to like your Russian grandmasters, who are more likely, like Karpov, to look for a very small positional advantage and milk it out and win in the long term. So it's an interesting thought. And but you say, okay, the difference within groups is greater than the difference between groups, that you would see the varieties of people would employ all different types thinking strategy, because it's just thought is universal. Like anybody, if you put any person behind the chess pieces and they're required to make decisions, that there's something universal about human conscious, human intelligence, human thought processing. And like Nakamura, it's interesting to think about. And God forbid, even we find out more information about what happened in Jersey City. It was saying, the Kabbalists, a lot of the sages, everybody goes through the same thought-making process. If there's a given nature of self-interest, that everybody basically acts in their own self-interest. So you say anybody who did any sort of action probably had some sort of thought process that was designed to determine what's in their own best self-interest. And then you can say everybody's basically a rational, logical actor that is acting in their own self-interest. And that could incorporate a group strategy, that it's in my self-interest to act according to my own group interest. Well, I'm not saying, okay, Yuan's in the chat here, and say, yeah, there's more than self-interest, obviously. But I mean, just from some of the precursors, that certainly there is such a thing as self-interest, that in his group interest, something different from self-interest. Saying group interest is something different than self-interest, or group interest is an extension of self-interest. That the reason someone acts in the interest of the group is because that's the interest of their self. So it's okay, there might be a predisposition to act according to a certain group strategy, but at the same time, the acting in accordance with the group strategy is actually acting in the person's own self-interest, that the person acts according to their group strategy because that's what's going to be best for themselves in the short term or long run. And then you could have a person, like a Jewish or Black Republican or something. I'm going to go against the generic group strategy because I've determined that what's in my own personal interest is in opposition to the group interest. And a lot of Jewish politics I'll be talking about this week on these various streams will look into that, like what is the greater group strategy, what has historically been the group strategy. Are we just acting out the historical group strategy because that's what we've always done and we're just going to keep on doubling down? Or is it possible for the group to say, okay, our historic strategy is becoming problematic and collectively we're going to change our strategy? Or is it individuals could say, I don't like the way my group strategy is going, and I'm going to act not in compliance with my group strategy according to a strategy that I've worked out on my own or copied from other groups. Or you could be a genetic determinist and say that in reality it's impossible for people to act against their given group strategy. So there's just various things to think about. Like, I just focus on the chess coaching. yeah, I don't want to get too philosophical here in my ramble of the chess coach, and so you tune in, for some further streams. We'll talk about it more in terms, I mean, God forbid, like suicide bombing, fighting till the death, or something. You're saying, well, how, or altruism is what?
Video? Oh.
Right, is making a talk. So someone do a various. What would appear to be against their own self-interest, where you could determine that really it was in their own self-interest, so like martyrdom or something like that. Can it be in your own self-interest to destroy yourself? And I mean, that you could look, okay, your self-interest versus your group interest, or your self-interest to self-destruct. Like at a certain point, you're in all or nothing, or God forbid, like the Jersey sitting. Was it a targeted attempt to destroy the Jewish community? And if so, what would be the reasoning behind it? Or was it a kill-be situation where, God forbid, this man had already committed a few murders and you knew it was basically over for him? Like at best, he goes to prison for the rest of his life. So whatever at that point in the strategy, just like kind of like a chess game. Like, okay, you have here, the guy's down to a king and 2 pawns versus queen. He's lost. It's conceivable maybe you could get a stalemate or something like that. So do you sack all your pieces? Do you try to make it last as long as possible? What do you do when you're in a losing situation? And so I think the chess model here, you're saying that's why we do it here. We coach chess just to teach people thinking processes, decision making, university preparatory, science and math. If you could make good decisions on the chessboard, hopefully you could make good decisions on life. And then it comes, I was talking to Crazy House, where there's the ego trap, where the top chess players try to make money playing chess. It was saying, like, it's very difficult to make money playing chess. It's like, if you're very intelligent, the intelligent person would determine that making money playing chess is not a good decision. But then there's the same time, like, okay, I just want to make money doing what I enjoy. So I like music or something. I love music, and so if I could make my living being a musician, that'd be great. In the same way, like I love chess, so if I could make my living playing chess, that would be great. And a lot of the top chess players fall into that trap because really, like most top chess players are constantly financially struggling. And you say, well, you're pretty smart. You could make really good decisions on the chessboard. How come you can't come up with a way to make these type decisions that, like the old wise saying goes, if you're so smart, how come you're not rich? Or all the various things that correlate to intelligence. To a certain extent, probably the amount of money a person has would be the strongest correlation to IQ, with some niches where maybe at the higher level, but certainly of all the correlates to intelligence, the amount of money a person has is probably going to be the highest. But yet these stronger chess players will keep on falling into this trap of trying to Nakamura is admitted, like, he's a professional chess player, but he's always learning about stocks. And I listen to like Nakamura on stocks, and like he's a smart guy, but like I don't think he knows as much about the stock market as I do. And he's recognizing that his ability to make money from chess is limited. And even as the top player in the U.S., I think he said he was making like $200,000-$300,000 a year, which is a substantial amount of money. But you say your average doctor makes more money than the best chess player in the United States. So Nakamura, you say, is he smarter than your average doctor? Maybe not. Maybe it's not. But in terms of these decision-making skills, is interesting to keep on thinking about. And I enjoy seeing these kids grow up, succeed, do better, and God forbid, like we had one of our kids that get shot last year, and various things that God forbid. Detroit's a violent city. There's a lot of violence here, and what are good decisions? It's a tough call to. Saying people could think through and make very poor decisions that you're saying, okay, like what was this person thinking? Well, they were thinking something. And so on the chessboard, it's like obvious where the better player can say, I know what you were thinking, but you just had an inferior thought process. You didn't see correctly. Like you thought you had a good idea, you thought it might work out, but it didn't because there was a deeper strategy. There was a combination of moves that you completely missed. And it could be like that in life. You say like, okay, like I'm going to be a thief, God forbid. And Magnus Carlsen's a multimillionaire, but he's the best in the world. Nakamura is the best player in the U.S., is making $200,000-$300,000 a year. So if Magnus Carlsen's making a few $1,000,000 a year, Nakamura claims that Magnus Carlsen's the only millionaire chess player, and he's probably right. You know, going around to the international competitions, maybe Gary Kasparov when he was champion. But at this point right now, only the world champion at chess is a millionaire. The top player in the U.S., Nakamura, is making a few $100,000 a year, and he's supplemented that by streaming. And Ben Feingold has suffered financially his whole life, and so recently streaming, education, having a chess club, maybe someone like Ben Feingold from Detroit originally is now middle class, upper middle class at best. Like Ben Feingold will have a hard time ever getting out of the, even entering the upper middle class. And Caruana, he probably makes less money than Nakamura. You're saying like in tournament prize funds, it's unlikely he made more than like $100,000-$200,000 a year in prize funds. There's a lot of expenses to that. And if he couldn't supplement his income the same way that Nakamura did through streaming, even though Caruana's having better results than him, that he's making less money than him. So, it's an interesting thing to think about, but you just look on the chessboard and you think like everybody attempts to make good decisions. But sometimes what you think is a good decision, kind of like the cold winter theory, long-term thinking versus short-term thinking. It's like you are short-term thinking, like, okay, like God forbid the use of violence, committing a crime, stealing. You're saying, well, short-term, I thought it was a good decision. You're like, God forbid, like I had an enemy and I used violence against them. And like short-term, it seemed like a good decision. Or stealing or something, like I saw something and I wanted it, so I just, God forbid, stole it. And you're saying that would be long-term a bad strategy. So that's what we try to do here, using chess to help people make good decisions, and a certain nature about the presumption that everybody will act in their own self-interest. At a certain level, the commonality of all humanity. Exactly, Johan. That's what we're doing here. We're teaching people to be better thinkers and make better decisions in life. And the process of becoming a better chess player will directly correlate to making better life decisions, because people are more used to thinking out. One thing, like I mentioned, the analytical thought structures of multiple possibilities that open up multiple possibilities that open up more multiple possibilities. Like in the game of chess, where you have multiple moves, and each one of your multiple moves open your opponent up to multiple moves, and exponentially gets not infinite, but beyond computation extremely quickly. So in life, that's obviously the same way, like homework, friends, sports, getting a job, family, girlfriend, and these various things where there's a trade-off. You have multiple decisions, and I just try to do my service. Obviously Nakamura is way better than me. He would beat me basically just as easily as he beats these kids. And very good. And doesn't mean he's a substantial better decision maker than me. Well, over the chessboard it does. And if we played a game, he would be able to look and he'd be like, well, I kind of know what you were thinking. I knew what you were trying to do. Oh, pardon, I get the hiccups. So if I was playing Nakamura and he beats me easily, and he looks like, well, I know why you were playing what you were playing. I know why you made the moves that you made. And I know how you thought that your combination of moves was going to provide you victory, but you were wrong. And, so you could say, like, decision making, turning to crime, drugs, poor decisions, violence, is saying, I knew that a person turns to make bad decisions, that they had some sort of calculation for how it was going to benefit themselves, but they just made a poor calculation. So I'm going to close it up, everybody. Everybody, Shabbat Shalom. Look forward to Weekend Review Sunday night. Yuan, I'm not sure what you did to irritate the mods there. I can't control those mods. And then Brundlecast should be Monday at noon with E. Michael Jones and Andrew. And Kevin Barrett reached out to me again for Thursday night, and he might record that on Skype. So we'll see how that works out. Sorry, I still got the hiccup. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Have a great weekend, and blessings to everyone.